What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Steve.
I'm Lindsay.
Today we're going to be reading to the top 10 most important moments in British history. I'm not really sure what to expect here, but I realized that since I've had Lindsay on the channel, we really haven't done much British history.
No.
So while I definitely have a long way to go to really understand all the ins and outs of British history, or even get close to the surface level of all the things that have happened in British history, I think you probably know very little about British history in general. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to kind of explore like a compilation list of some of the most important things that have happened in British history. I really have no idea what's going to be on this list. So I think we'll just go ahead and jump in here and check it out.
Okay.
All right, let's check out the top 10 most important moments in British history.
The Protectorate was a period that took place during the Commonwealth when England, Ireland and Scotland were under the rule of Lord Protector Oliver Cromwell and subsequently his son Richard Cromwell. This was the only time in history that England had republican rule. Monarchists refer to this period as the Interregnum, a time when there was no ruler on the throne of England. This resulted in the Restoration, which took place the following year. The demise of the Republican rule still allowed many of the recently established democratic institutions to remain, which have endured until modern times.
You've heard of Cromwell, right?
I have, but I don't know why.
It wasn't until the relatively recent past that I started getting kind of interested in history. Growing up, like when I was in school, I was not interested in history.
Yeah, I don't think most.
I like certain things like geography. I loved math. I liked science, but history was just not. I loved writing. History just not something I could get into very easily, at least. There's so much packed into the history on this island that it's like I catch myself mixing up names and whatnot. Like it's one of those things that you have to rehash over and over and over again and learn about over and over and over again to really truly get your bearings right about you. And I think
so much.
Right. There's so much. And like, you know, you mix up different dates, you mix up different times and names. And it's just like, it's so overwhelming in some ways. And I just wanted to like say that because I think you're probably going to experience the same thing.
Yeah.
Because the history thing, I even though I've learned a number of things about British history, it is hard to retain all the bits and pieces because it does get very confusing. You know, the way things are described and the dates and everything.
Prior to 1776, what we now know as the United States of America was simply a collection of 13 colonies on the east coast bordering the Atlantic. Residents there were becoming
so weird to think about.
Dissatisfied with the British rule and had been waging war on the Brits for more than a year. Finally, by the summer of 1776, all 13 of the colonies had agreed to segregate from England. Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence, which was then adopted by Congress. The American War of Independence was not yet finished. It would go on for another 5 years. Number 8, the Great Fire of London.
Heard about it.
Yeah.
Hey, did you see that 1666?
Was when it was?
I think so. 1666. I think I remember that now. And I think I saw that date at another time. We did the video recently about the Parliament building. That was in like the 1800s. So we were curious to have something to do with the Great Fire, but obviously that didn't, because that would have been a couple hundred years before that.
Couple years, yeah.
In the summer of 1666, a blaze engulfed the city of London, destroying almost everything in its path.
Oh my gosh.
13,200 houses were taken, as well as 87 churches. It's estimated that the vast majority of London residents lost their homes to the fire. Strangely, amid all this destruction, there were hardly any reports of deaths taking place due to the fire.
That's crazy.
Historians have established several reasons for this. Firstly, the deaths of commoners were not always recorded, and secondly, the bodies may have been completely incinerated, leaving no evidence of how many really perished.
Oh my gosh.
You know, I mean, thinking about if pretty much this entire city, imagine a whole city on fire, that fire would have got very hot because it has plenty of fuel, right?
Yeah.
And so like you could incinerate people that way, I'm guessing, right?
I wonder how it started.
I don't know. That's something I've been wanting to check out. Just haven't ever gotten around to it. We'll probably do that sometime in the near future. But it makes me wonder how much of London is original, like from before 1666.
That's true. So it destroyed almost everything.
Obviously, a lot of the old buildings are still standing. So it must have been certain sections of London or something because, you know, I can imagine so many of these old buildings would still be standing if, you know, the fire was the entire city, obviously.
The city had to be entirely rebuilt, and some historians believe the fire was actually beneficial in a way because it eliminated many unsanitary and plague-infected buildings.
Wow.
In the 14th century, British commoners had a lot to be upset about. The plague had recently wiped out a huge portion of the population, which meant that labourers were able to demand more money because workers were no longer so readily available. The government, however, set the Ordinance of Labourers, which cemented wages at the low amounts they were before the Black Death. They also levied a poll tax to fund the war against the French, which ate up even more of the peasants' wages. All of this led to the Great Rising of 1381, which had an impact on the 100 Years' War because authorities were not able to raise taxes for funding as they had for prior conflicts. Number 6, the suffragette.
Wow. Can you imagine? I remember I've never really done a video specifically about the plague itself, but I did a video about a village that was affected during the plague, and I'm not going to give anything away. Maybe we'll talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
But let's just say that was a very interesting video, and I learned a little bit about the plague, but I still want to actually dive in and learn more about it because, you know, I'm sure that's something that we learn, you know, about in school. But again, briefly, it wasn't something like I was, you know, I'm probably 14 years old or something. I wasn't really paying attention that much at that point. So that would probably be interesting.
The suffragette movement is formed.
What would the vote mean to you, Mrs. Watson?
1903.
Though the women's suffrage movement had been underway for several years already, 1903 marked an important event in British history. The Women's Social and Political Union was created by Emmeline Pankhurst and others, which took direct action to further their goals. The First World War put a pause on suffrage campaigning, though there was still some progress. Many cite 1918 as the year that women in the UK gained the right to vote, but in fact, at that point it excluded women under the age of 30, as well as those who didn't independently own property. It was only a decade later in 1928 that all women were granted the right to cast a vote.
When was that in the U.S.? Wasn't it 1920?
I don't remember.
Where that scene?
But it seemed like it was fairly close.
It was definitely very close to the same timeline. But I in my head, I had 1920 because I swear it seems like we just like had a 100-year anniversary of that recently.
I remember that too.
Yeah, so I think it was.
But time flies, and
yeah, who knows?
Like 1990 was yesterday, so.
Yeah, it's true. End of World War II. That would obviously be one of the most important moments in British history.
5. The end of World War II. The entire period of the Second World War, ranging from 1939 to 1945, was evidently a remarkable time in the history of the United Kingdom. Of the many things that came of the war, one of the most notable was a push for a bigger and more intervening government. The welfare of people during wartime had become a government problem that was dealt with to the satisfaction of the population. A spirit of community-mindedness was also fostered by the difficult times of war, and the British people came out of the conflict with strengthened class relationships.
I can't remember when the NHS started, but it was around this time. This was one of the things that seemed to kick it off, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And so, I think that might be why there seems to be more of a social net, if you will, in the UK versus the US, because we didn't, while we entered the war, we weren't as obviously affected by it at home, you know, so we didn't quite feel, our people didn't feel the same struggles and stuff that were going on in the UK at the time. So it makes a lot of sense in some ways when you look at it like that.
Which would lead to more left-leaning social policies moving forward. Henry VIII is probably most famous for his 6 wives, 2 of whom he had beheaded, and it was his desire to end his marriage with his first wife, Catherine of Aragon.
How's that go? I'm Henry VIII, I am. Henry VIII, I am. I got married to the widow next door. She'd been married 7 times before, and everyone says, Henry. How's that go?
How do you know that? I've never...
Really? Isn't that like a well-known like children's like?
I don't know. I've never heard that.
In my head, I have that, and I'm probably butchering it. I don't know for sure how that sung, but I know as a kid I used to sing that all the time.
Really?
But I can't remember exactly how it goes now. And it's so funny. Like so many of like the little songs kids sing, nursery rhymes, things like that, come out of Britain.
Yes. Yeah, we've learned, like...
Ring Around the Rosies.
London Bridge.
London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down. My Fair Lady. Like, I don't even understand where that comes from. Like, what? Like,
maybe, like, they're really old nursery
very
rhymes,
old,
so
yeah.
probably they were brought over with the people who came.
Yeah, and then it just generation after generation passed that on. And that's so crazy. Yeah. It's so crazy. That's another guy I want to look into. Henry VIII.
Aragon that speared on one of the key events in British history. Catherine was unable to give Henry the male heir he so needed, so he petitioned Pope Clement VII to annul his marriage. When he was refused, he took the radical step of severing ties with Rome and started the English Reformation. He named himself Supreme Head of the Church of England and was excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church, though he always remained true to his Catholic upbringing. The Magna Carta, which can be translated to the Great Charter, is one of history's most revered and renowned documents. It was instituted by King John of England, and the premise behind it was to ensure that every citizen, including the monarchy, would be subject to the law of the land.
How crazy is that, a king doing that?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, especially at the time. I think that is something very undervalued to learn about. I think we really need to look into the Magna Carta.
Oh, yeah, I definitely think.
It's something that, like, again, these are, that's another thing I probably learned about in school, but it's like, if so many things, even if you're taught about them in school, if you're not paying attention because it's just, you're not interested in the kid, a lot of kids are interested in lots of things like, right?
So it doesn't stick.
And so if for some reason it doesn't, that information does not get shown to you as an adult, you're probably not really going to know a lot about it. Like, that's a topic that I need to learn more about. And I think you do as well. Absolutely.
Much of the text has been edited since its inception, and very few of the clauses remain in modern law. But nonetheless, the Magna Carta is the basis of the British Constitution.
That's another one, Doomsday Book. We need to look into the Doomsday Book soon.
What is that?
Well, I know the gist of it, but if I say exactly what it is, no, that's what I always thought too. But from what I understand, it's not really. It has nothing to do with that. Really, it sounds like something like the end of the world or something. But it's more of like it's like a registry, right, guys? Like if I'm not mistaken, it's like a registry of property and names and stuff like that. I'm not exactly sure. Something I haven't really looked into. I only know. What I've heard, a little bit I've heard about it, but we got to look into that soon too.
Represented in the document have been influential in bills of rights around the world. On June 18th, 1815, Napoleon and his army marched to the Belgian village of Waterloo to fight against the Duke of Wellington and his army of Brits, Germans, and Belgians. Napoleon made some critical strategic errors which led to his troops losing the battle. This victory for England marked the end of France's dominance in Europe and a return to the previous power Britain had exerted for centuries. The result of this conflict is thought to have an impact on world history as well, bringing in a period of relative peace which allowed for technical innovations and prosperity. Number 1, the Battle of Hastings. Nearly 1,000 years ago, the face of England was forever changed. In a battle won by William the Conqueror, the language of official documents became Latin, but of even more impact was the influence of the French language over English, especially in the tradition of names. Traditional Anglo-Saxon names began to disappear in favour of French names that we today consider inherently English, like William, Henry, and Robert.
He was about to say, do you agree with this list? I can say, based off what I know, I think this list was pretty good to show some of the most important moments in British history. Not sure if this is all these are the top 10 or if there's probably other moments that some people would say were more important than some of these. But what I liked about this specifically is that it gave us quite a few things we can delve into and learn more about.
Yeah, more detail.
Specifically the Magna Carta, and it made me think of the Doomsday Book. Those are two things that I definitely had wanted to look at in the past, and I forgot about. I just haven't even thought about.
Yeah.
But I think you would be into looking into the Magna Carta with me because you actually mentioned that maybe a couple months ago now that I remember. But yeah, guys, this was really interesting. Let us know in the comments. Would this be your top 10 list? What other parts of British history would you say would be most important for us to learn about? Because obviously, you know, British history
it's
is
a long history.
very long.
There's a lot to.
And coming from America, while we did probably learn all sorts of things in school, let's be honest, a lot of kids, such as myself, maybe you, I don't think you were that into history when you were a kid.
No, I wasn't.
And so, you know, it's one of those things that goes in one ear and out the other when you're a kid. But when you become an adult, you become, you know, you start kind of realizing how interesting these events can be to learn about.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. Please click that like button. Feel free to drop your comments or suggestions about this video or others. And don't forget to subscribe to continue to follow us on our journey to discover anything and everything about the UK and Ireland. Till next time, guys. Peace.
Bye.